reading from the first book of Kings. The Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at night. God said, "Ask something of me, and I will give it to you." Solomon answered, "O Lord, my God, you have made me, your servant, king, to succeed my father David. But I am a mere youth, not knowing at all how to act. I serve you in the midst of the people whom you have chosen, a people so vast that it cannot be numbered or counted. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding heart to judge your people and to distinguish right from wrong. For who is able to govern this vast people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon made this request. So God said to him, "Because you have asked for this, not for a long life for yourself, nor for riches, nor for the life of your enemies, but for understanding, so that you may know what is right, I do as you requested. I give you a heart so wise and understanding that there has never been anyone like you up to now, and after you there will come no one to equal you." The word of the Lord.
Our first reading for this Sunday is taken from the first book of Kings. Let us reflect on making the kingdom of God our top priority in life. Daily living is really based on making decisions about what is more important to be attended to. That's setting priorities. This should happen on a daily basis. This should happen also during our lifetime. Without a clear set of priorities, then we will have no direction in life. In our spiritual growth, the top priority is that God may reign, the kingdom of God. But how do we go about it? Choosing it as our top priority. In the first reading, the example of King Solomon is presented to us. Someone who at a young age has been called by God to assume a big responsibility to be the king of the people Israel. He is the successor of that great king, his father David. Imagine the insecurity of this young man. But we also appreciate his wisdom. As a young person, probably we could excuse Solomon for not having a clear set of priorities. We can always excuse him and say, well, what can we do? He is a young person. A young person, is privileged to have some sort of confusion about one's priorities. But through God's grace, Solomon gives us a model. He could have asked for riches. After all, he is king. He could have asked for a long life so that his reign would go extended for years and years. He could have asked for the life of his enemies. May they all die, so that he would be left alone to conquer and rule everything, all territories. Any king could have set that, one of those options, as a priority. But in the prayer of Solomon, he asked not for a long life, not for riches, not for an extension of his territory. He asked for wisdom, a heart that understands, a heart that will be docile, obedient to God. For what? Why was this the choice of Solomon? In his prayer, he tells God, I need this understanding heart so that I can govern your people with understanding, with justice, so that I can render service to you, my God, who is the real King of these people. But I am young. I am limited. But for me to be able to perform well as king, for me to be able to do my mission that came from you, my God, give me wisdom. God was very much pleased with Solomon. God was so pleased that He gave to Solomon a big share of wisdom so that no one could even surpass his understanding heart. And we know God also gave to Solomon what he had not asked for. Solomon, a man, a king with a clear set of priorities, coming from his awareness of his mission. He is now king, not of his own people, but king of God's people. So how could one rule over God's people? How could one be an agent of God who is king? That type of thinking led Solomon to ask for the best gift, the priority. Give me wisdom.
A reading from the letter of Paul to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, we know that all things work for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called. And those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified. The word of the Lord.
Our second reading for this Sunday is taken from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans. We have been reflecting on the kingdom of God as the top priority in our lives. All other things which may be valuable will remain valuable, but in terms of prioritizing them is the kingdom of God, the controlling supreme value in our lives. In the first reading, the King Solomon is presented as a model of such a priority. As a new king, he asked God for wisdom, an understanding heart, so that he could do his mission, which is to govern God's people. All the other things were incidental to him: riches, an extension of power, a long life. Those things were not the most important in the kingdom of God, so he chose the right one. Understanding, wisdom, in view of his mission as King of God's people. St. Paul, in the second reading, gives us a vision of Christian life, a vision that should define our priority. St. Paul tells us that we have been called by God. This is an important element of our life as human beings and as Christians. We have been called by God. Responding to that call should be our priority. All of our activities, all of our concerns should move towards the proper response to this fundamental call of God, that we belong to Him. This is another way of depicting the kingdom of God. God calls us as His own. We belong to Him. We are His kingdom. He is our King. Do we appreciate that? Do we appreciate this gift that comes from God, totally undeserved by us? And if we appreciate this gift, we will make that our priority. How can I be less unworthy of this calling? How can I respond to God, who calls me to be part of His kingdom? St. Paul tells us that one response, maybe the most important response, is love. We are called to love. That should be a priority in God's kingdom. While other things are important, in the end, using again the expression of St. Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians, everything will pass away. But the only thing that will endure is love. In God's kingdom, that is our priority. All other things should be done in love. Without love, all these things, no matter how good and important they are in themselves, they amount to nothing in the overall scheme of the kingdom of God. So, my dear brothers and sisters, what importance do we put to this calling? Do we make it the priority of our lives, not to waste God's calling, to respond to it in love? And God, according to St. Paul, has equipped those whom He has called. Those whom He has called, He has justified. And those whom He has justified, He will in turn glorify. What else could we ask God for? He provides us with everything that we need so that we could be worthy members of His kingdom. What do we do with His calling? Let us follow the lead of St. Paul. Let us make it our priority to live in love so that we could always belong to the kingdom of God.
The proclamation of the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to His disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure buried in a field, which a person finds and hides again, and out of joy goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant searching for fine pearls. When he finds a pearl of great price, he goes and sells all that he has and buys it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea, which collects fish of every kind. When it is full, they haul it ashore and sit down to put what is good into buckets. What is bad, they throw away. Thus it will be at the end of the age. The angels will go out and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth." "Do you understand all these things?" They answered, "Yes." And He replied, "Then every scribe who has been instructed in the kingdom of heaven is like the head of a household who brings from his storeroom both the new and the old." The Gospel of the Lord.
Our Gospel passage for this Sunday is taken from St. Matthew. We have been reflecting on the kingdom of God as the top priority of our lives. There are many important, valuable things in our lives, but how do we prioritize? The readings for today suggest that all of these should find their reference point in the kingdom of God as our absolute value and priority. In the first reading from the first book of Kings, Solomon, the new young king, could have asked God for riches, for a bigger territory, for a long life, so that he could have a long reign. But no, he was clear about his mission. He is the king of God's people, Israel. So he asked what was important for his mission: wisdom, an understanding heart, so that he could govern God's people with justice, with fairness. What an admirable young man. At such a tender age, his priorities were correct, and God was pleased with him. In the second reading, St. Paul tells the Romans that our lives, not only as human beings, but as Christians, our lives rest on something fundamental: the calling of God. We are called to belong to Him. We are called to be part of His kingdom. And that should be our priority, the quality of response to that calling, which is love. Love above all else. And all the other things, activities, talents that we possess, all of them will acquire meaning if they are done in love. And through love, we will certainly become vibrant members of the kingdom of God. The priority. Now in the gospel, through parables, Jesus again depicts to us the meaning of the kingdom of God and our participation in such a kingdom. In the first parable, we find the kingdom of God compared to a treasure that is buried in a field, which a person by chance discovers. You know, the kingdom of God is a buried treasure. It is not always obvious. It is not always seen. That's one part of the mystery of the kingdom of God. It is important. It is a treasure, but not always visible. It appears to be buried. That is important so that we will remain humble and we would really search in earnest. Are we searching for the kingdom of God? Are we searching for this treasure? Or are we searching for things that may not be related at all to the kingdom of God? This is important as we develop the theme of prioritizing the kingdom of God. Are we searching for the treasure called the kingdom of God? Or are we pretending that we have already discovered it, that it is obvious, that we see it all the time? No, part of our priority is to keep on actively looking for it, for it may not be seen as easily as we think it is. Our minds, our hearts could be clouded. We need to look for it. Now look at what the person who discovered it do. He saw it, the buried treasure. He went home and sold everything that he had so that he could buy the whole land. He could buy the whole property with the treasure there. If he is the owner now of the whole lot, then everything, including the buried treasure, now belongs to him. Look at the priority here. Everything else could be sold. Everything else could be released. He could let go of everything. Why? Because now the most important treasure is found. I am not saying that his house, his jewelry are all useless. No. But they now acquire a relative relative value in reference to the absolute value, which is the kingdom of God. And look at the joy. The joy. This is an important element of prioritizing. How do you know that you have chosen something that you are convinced of as a priority? When you can let go of other things joyfully. Joyfully. Joy is a mark that someone is convinced that the treasure cannot be surpassed. So the other things that I possess, even if they are valuable, could be let go joyfully, calmly, because I am not losing anything in the end. I am gaining the most important treasure. Do we treat the kingdom of God that way? Can we let go of other things? Not because they are useless, but because by letting go of them, I am gaining them back in the kingdom of God. They acquire their real value in relationship to the most important treasure, the kingdom of God. This is the same line of thinking present in the second parable, the pearl of great price. And the merchant who finds it, again, joyfully, freely, sells everything that he possesses in order to acquire the most precious pearl that he has been looking for. My dear brothers and sisters, let me pause here. Is the kingdom of God as commanding as it should be in our minds and our hearts? Will all the other things that we value really in a way pale in comparison to the kingdom of God? Sometimes I tease young people. I ask them, which is more important? No? The kingdom of God or $50 million? They will say $50 million. Wow, but these are young people. Where did they learn that from? Maybe from the adults, telling them that what is more important is money rather than the kingdom of God. Now, this is a journey that we should all undergo. We should learn from Solomon. We should learn from St. Paul. Yes, there is something to give up, but there is so much to gain. You are not really giving up. You are gaining everything from the value, the supreme value of the kingdom of God. And in the end, in the third parable, at the end of time, we will be judged. Who would be counted among those who would belong to the kingdom, and who would be discarded? Well, those who chose the kingdom of God will belong to the kingdom of God. Those who did not find any value in the kingdom of God, probably God will say, well, why will you join us in the kingdom of God when you do not find it as valuable? So the time that we have here on earth is a time of discernment, clarity. Let us set our priorities right. The kingdom of God is of supreme value. All others acquire their value in reference to the kingdom of God. In a few days, we shall be celebrating the feast of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Society of Jesus. Someone who struggled through his own set of priorities. But in the end, after a painful but joyful process of conversion, he was given the light. It is the service of God, loving God and serving God in all, being a humble soldier of Christ the King. This is the supreme good, and all other things could be let go. That's why he can say, "Take and receive, O Lord, all the things that I hold precious, my mind, my liberty, all that I hold, all that I am, I give up. I let go for you. But give me your love. That's enough for me. That's enough. For gaining the love of God, you do not lose anything. You gain everything. The word has been exposed. Let us now fulfill it.